the very first day knew that I had made a mistake. I had burned a bridge that was coming back to haunt me.
The world is obsessed with fast-track success. It's easy to think that people become successful overnight. But let's face it, more often than not, what we see on social media is total BS. I'm here to look past the perception of perfect success and focus on life's detours, perceived mistakes, and even wrong choices, and understand the real road traveled up the career ladder. After all, we're all effing up. Everette Fortner is a leader in the career management field. Today, he serves as a career coach for college students and young adults, specializing in helping people discover their possibilities and pursue meaningful lives. Everette received a BE from Vanderbilt University's School of Engineering and a master's in business from Darden. From there, Everette spent nearly 2 decades in consumer products marketing and general management with companies like Frito-Lay, Kraft, and Nabisco. Following that period, Everette landed at the University of Virginia, more specifically back at the Darden School of Business, where he served as executive director of the Career Development Center and External Relations. Everette contributed 19 years and counting of his career to the University of Virginia. Most recently, he served as the Associate Vice President of Career and Professional Development and still serves as an adjunct faculty member at the UVA Darden School of Business. Everette kindly hired me as a corporate relations associate when he was executive director for career development and corporate relations at the Darden School. Everette played a crucial part in my own career journey. Not only did he shepherd me in my role for 2 years, he helped me to figure out my next move. For the first time, I was able to be strategic about my path forward toward success. I got into my startup journey and ultimately became an HR executive through Everette's guidance. Welcome, Everette. I'm thrilled you're here to share your journey and excited to dig in.
Thanks, Deanne. This should be a lot of fun. You have a lot of dirt on me, so I'll have to be careful here.
Why don't we start by having you share about your current venture, what you're working on?
I am currently a career coach, and I am having more fun than I've had in the last 40 years of my career. I'm working with a couple of target audiences. I'm working mostly with young adults, 22 to 26, who maybe took a job out of college that is not as fulfilling as they want it to be. And now they're stepping back and want to be more strategic about that decision. And then I'm also working with a number of mid-career adults who are at let's call it around age 40, and at a juncture in their career where they want to make a strategic decision about what to do the next 20 years. And working with both of those groups with a design thinking approach, which forces everyone to step back and think about themselves and what's important to them and what patterns and themes have been in their life in the first part of their life and what needs to be going forward in their life. And second, then helping them with their career board of directors, bringing in that group, helping them explore possibilities. And then finally prototyping it and going and getting it. Using that 3-step process, no matter what kind of client, and just the relationships that I'm building are probably deeper than I've been able to build when I've been running a career office. So loving it.
Yeah, that's awesome. I got a dose of it, as I mentioned in the intro. So I can't imagine what the full cycle is like. And I know that's your sweet spot. So congrats. I'm so happy to hear you found joy in what you do every day. Let's dive in. Let's go back to college. Your degree was in chemical engineering. And when looking at your resume, it doesn't necessarily appear as though you took a lot of chemical engineering roles. So talk to me about that. Is there chemical engineering embedded in what you've done in your career, or did you decide to pivot?
Was that a facetious question? Deanne, I was the first in my family to go to college, and you didn't go to college to get a liberal arts degree. The only other friend that my family knew that had a kid who went to college went to the University of Georgia majoring in English, and they all made fun of her. And so I went to college having to really go for something a little more rigorous. And I first chose biomedical engineering, which was even more difficult. It was in the early days of biomedical engineering, and I didn't know if I wanted to go to med school, which was a common path, or do something. I had no idea what I wanted to do. Biomedical engineering sounded hard, but I quickly learned that actually chemical engineering was a lot broader and gave you a lot more options, because I was all of a sudden starting to realize I might not be an engineer and I might need a lot of options.
Yeah.
So by junior year, I realized I wasn't going to be a chemical engineer, or I didn't love the courses that I was taking, but I was too far along to go back.
Mm.
And again, I knew that the degree would create options for me.
You indicated that you were the first in your family to go upon that journey. How did that feel?
I guess I did not know what to expect, but I was definitely all in.
Mm.
Never once was there an expectation that I wouldn't go to college. I had an older brother and sister who didn't, but my parents, I was the one. I was the one who made good grades and worked really hard.
No
And
pressure.
although I didn't feel it as pressure, I just felt it as an expectation
Mm.
that I was going to go to school and it was going to be a gift to me. And I started with a 2-year scholarship. And then I spent all 4 years working relatively half or full time to pay for it. But it was a gift to me to be able to go. So I finished a degree in chemical engineering, but I was recruited by Frito-Lay looking for campus leaders. Not, they didn't care what your major was. And so they identified me after months of courting and also interviewing for those engineering jobs. I decided to pivot the first time and go into sales and sales management so I could start developing myself as a leader, and left the chemical engineering degree behind. So that's my first job. I was on a Frito-Lay route truck, visiting grocery stores in the middle of the night and learning the
Oh,
business from the ground up. And that was a great journey, but it made me realize two things really quickly. One, I didn't want to be running a route truck in the middle of the night.
mm.
And second, I knew nothing about business. Now, I don't know if that was my first F up or not, because a lot of people with engineering degrees made a lot more money than I did coming out and going into sales with Frito. But I knew it was more me and more my personality.
Mm.
And so I think it was a good decision. And it certainly was good preparation for going back to business school. Most people wait 2 to 4 years to go back to business school. And I kind of think I thought I would wait a couple of years, but I went ahead and applied anyway because, nothing to lose, applied, get deferred, whatever. And so I got in after that first year and it made sense to go right away.
I have to imagine you were one of the younger students when you entered Darden for your MBA. What was it like to be the youngest, or rather least experienced?
Yeah, probably both. I was much more overwhelmed at going to business school than I was going to undergraduate. There were really smart people and really experienced people in my class. And Darden had a reputation back then for 20% flunk out. And so I was so worried I would be one of the 20%, even though I was working really, really hard. But the content was so interesting. I loved every single class. And so I was so engaged for the 2 years, and it was so different than the 4 years of undergrad that it was such a positive experience.
Hmm. And then how was recruiting for you?
For some reason, I identified marketing right away. Not for some reason. I know from my Frito-Lay days that I wanted to do marketing. I was a salesman in Jackson, Mississippi, and I would receive a shipment of marketing materials from headquarters. And I would let it sit there and do nothing with it. And I remember thinking, gosh, someone spent a lot of money on that material. I should figure out why, and I should figure out how to interact and relate to salespeople so that they'll actually use my marketing material. So right away, I thought marketing was the career I wanted to pursue. Plus, frankly, I didn't know what investment banking was. I didn't know what consulting was. I had no idea
Yeah.
those. And I also then immediately learned about them and saw that they were very demanding careers. Not that I didn't want to work very hard, but the consultants at that time traveled 80% of the time. The investment bankers worked 80 to 120 hours a week. And I got married a week after graduation from Vanderbilt, and I knew having a family was going to be super important to me. And so those careers didn't seem to fit me
Mm.
from a family perspective. At least I didn't think so. And so I summer interned at General Foods, which became Kraft later in my career. We can talk about same company, and then got an offer to go back there full time and started my first full time assignment as the assistant brand manager on stovetop stuffing.
You're married, you've been in school for most of your career at this point, and you're entering the real world yet again, but now with that longer term mindset. How are you feeling?
So the funny thing about business school is a lot of people work so hard for 2 years of business school, then they really want to take the summer off, and their job doesn't start till July 1st or August 1st. We were so poor and in such debt, and we're our first baby a month away after we graduated, that I
Mm,
started 2 days after graduation at Kraft. And it was a great start. I really was at the place that I was meant to be. I love the food business. I loved marketing, the concepts of marketing. My different twist on marketing was that marketing's about the consumer, right? But it's also about getting things done through your sales force. And because I had been there, and I mentioned that a few minutes ago, my pitch was to also let's be the brand that really helps the sales force sell us. It was a good start, but it was a lot of hard work.
did you find struggles with having a baby enter your life and wanting to make your career?
The biggest thing was, especially in living in suburban New York and having about an hour commute, 45-minute commute, is you're gone. I worked early, so I tended to be gone at 7 a.m. and get home at 6 p.m. And your babies go to bed at 7 p.m., so you just really don't see them. And
Yeah.
that was super difficult. And, I think a lot of people face it, a lot of working people face it, but it's just not easy. It's harder to build those bonds. I would say that Sally worked on the weekends. Sally's my wife. So I had both babies full time on the weekends. And that does allow you to really develop those deeper bonds when you're a single parent with them, as a lot of spouses that stay home with parents are this a single spouse at home. It's hard to build
Yeah.
those relationships, but it was fun to be able to do that on the weekends.
You went on to Nabisco. Why did you make the move?
Let me back up because I
Okay.
think there's another important transition there. After 4 years with Kraft General Foods, I moved to Oscar Meyer, a division of Kraft in Madison, Wisconsin. And I did that because I get bored easily. And it's important for people to challenge themselves and to seek out new opportunities. And there were some really good things that could happen to my career by making such a move. I was following a mentor out there. We had been in Danbury, Connecticut for 4 years, and we'd lost money on our house every single day of those 4 years. And so back then, companies actually helped you make that move and compensated you for some of the loss that you had. So making a geographic move at that time was very financially lucrative just because it helped pay for some of that loss that we'd had. So there were a lot of good reasons for it. It started a pattern of 9 moves over the course of 20 years that
Mm,
is very challenging for a family.
yeah.
And I look back and say, gosh, I wish I hadn't moved so much. And that first move could have been one that maybe I didn't need to move. I didn't need to make that move to continue to get rewarded and promoted. I did it because I wanted more challenge and I was bored. It was a great move because Oscar Mayer was a fun, smaller business in a smaller town, a little bit more balance, a 15-minute commute. So there's a lot of reasons that it was good. The kids were young then, so they're resilient and young and can move, but it was set a pattern. By moving to Madison, Wisconsin, we almost knew that we had to move again
Mm.
eventually. And so that set up a pattern of several moves, including the next one that you just asked about.
And so you were in Madison for did you stay there for your next move to Nabisco, or were you there just a short period?
So I was there 4 years.
Mhm.
And then, because I get bored easily, I started seeking what's next. So this was at the point where Kraft and General Foods and Oscar Mayer and Post, several divisions were merging all of their sales forces together. And I was chosen as one of the 20 leaders across the country to run one of the regions. And
Mm.
so that was a move to Memphis, Tennessee, purely a developmental role. No other marketing people moved into those roles. It was only senior salespeople, but they allowed me to help me develop as a general manager and as a leader. As a marketing person, you always manage 2 to 5 people, but as a sales manager, you immediately, or at least at this point, I had 110 people. And so you learn to manage people a lot better. And of course, manage customers. That's the other big part of a sales role. So I did that role for just 2 years and then made a move to Nabisco. That's probably one of those places that I effed it up somewhere along that route.
At Nabisco?
Yeah, in the transition. In Memphis, in the sales role, I recommended that we close the region because customers were consolidating. The company was looking to drive further cost out of the sales organization. So rather than cut back on my 110 people, that were the 100 of them were line people calling on customers, why not eliminate the overhead? Myself and my direct reports, the staff people in the region. That recommendation was a great one, and we implemented it, but obviously forced a transition and a move for me. One good piece of career advice is when you put yourself in play, like moving within your own company, you should probably look everywhere and consider options before you decide on one. And so I did that, had a former boss mentor at Nabisco recruit me to come to Nabisco. That in itself was a great decision. Lots of good that came out of it. I don't think I handled it as well as I could have. I must have. I know that I burned bridges in doing that. And I wish I could have done it differently. I think the decision was still the right one. But if I look back on my 40-year career, that was a pivotal moment. I could have stayed at Kraft and gone to Chicago and run a big business there and loved it and continued to stay in corporate America another 30 years. But I think that was one point where, should I have stayed or should I have moved? Good things happened because I moved, but good things would have happened had I stayed with Kraft also. So I moved to Nabisco.
Well, that's the whole point, though. As you're going along in the journey, you're thinking, this doesn't feel good. This is an F up. Where's my career going to go? But whatever number of years later, you look back and you go, yeah, that didn't feel so great at the time, but I know where I ended up. And wow, that worked out, even though it didn't feel so great in the moment.
I think one of the big learnings is that either decision was fine. And in the moment, it seemed so pivotal.
Yeah.
And I would have turned out okay with either decision. But in the moment, it was so much stress and such a hard decision. So, yeah, I think the perspective of time is certainly helpful.
Okay. So Nabisco.
The reason I took the job, it was my first real general manager job. So I had two small plants reporting to me, plant managers, as well as the marketing people, logistics, sales. And then almost immediately, Kraft, who I just left, buys Nabisco. So that became the complicating factor. That transaction was underway when I spent 2 years running a couple of businesses at Nabisco. That thing I talked about earlier, I get bored. So that's when I went to my boss and said, hey, over the next couple of years, I'm not in any hurry. I just moved to New Jersey. I'm really happy here. I'd like to consider an international assignment. And my boss said, great, here's how you do that. You just start networking and getting to know some of the people in the international, and good things come out of conversations. As a matter of fact, I just heard the people from Asia were going to be in for an annual meeting. Why don't you have a conversation with them? Just learn about Asia. I was like, where's Asia? But okay, I will. And so I had a conversation. Asia was Singapore, was where we were located in Asia, or at least our headquarters. And 2 weeks later, moved to Singapore. I mean, that's how
2
fast
weeks
it happened.
later. Oh my
2
gosh.
weeks later. So careful what you ask for is a little bit of advice there. Getting international experience is developmental, professionally and personally.
You made it sound so easy. Like, oh, in 2 weeks, we moved to Singapore and there we were. I have to imagine it was not quite that easy, especially because it wasn't just you. It was your wife. It was 2 children, or had you had the third? Yep. You've had
3.
now 3 kids. And I think if memory serves me correctly, your third is quite young.
Yeah. So the kids were 2, 4, and 7. And so, yeah, another great adventurous move. The 7-year-old's starting to feel the effects of his third or fourth move. Even the 2-year-old had a best friend across the street that she
Oh,
didn't want to leave. But again, if I look back over the 40-year history or the first 20 years, we moved too many times. And this was just one of them. So it was not easy. We packed up the house. We took half of it to Singapore with us on a crate. We lived on mattresses for 6 weeks. For Sally, it was quite a challenge. Of course, she couldn't work in Singapore, but not that she wanted to with the kids at that age. I think she would want to be home as much as she could anyway. And with the amount of travel that I was going to have, that she needed to be. But to move to Singapore with no friends, no support, we one great moment. We had a car, which was unusual actually in Singapore for many expats to have cars, but we had a car and she took the kids back and forth to school, which was actually a long way because they went to an American school that was on the edge of the island. And she was about to turn into McDonald's, which was the kind of the thing the kids did after school every day, kind of made them remember home. She was behind a school bus and she bumped into the school bus because she was distracted with so many things going around her, and didn't hurt the school bus at all. But of course, the bus driver came out of the school bus shouting at her in Mandarin, and she just burst into tears. It was just one of those moments of,
yeah, that's rough.
why am I here? What am I doing? What is this guy saying? Am I going to go to jail for bumping into this car? Nothing happened, but it was just it was a reminder of this is not easy moving to
Mm.
Asia for a family. And for me, I didn't speak a word of Mandarin. My business was in China and Indonesia and the Philippines. And so I was traveling 4 out of 5 days. I was home every weekend, but I was traveling quite a bit. And doing that to the family, leaving them in Singapore was a big challenge for them.
You had mentioned leaving Kraft for Nabisco potentially had burned some bridges. I'm curious, when then Kraft came for Nabisco and took on Nabisco, did any of those burned bridges pop up, or were you able to skirt the bridges and take tunnels?
No, that's exactly the insight that I was hoping you would miss. When Kraft and Nabisco were merging and people were being placed in jobs, I was not getting an assignment over and over. And what I realized is that when I had made the transition from Kraft to Nabisco, there was a senior leader who had been my champion and my mentor the whole time that I had been at Kraft. I had followed him to Oscar Meyer, and now was the opportunity to follow him back to Kraft. And when I chose not to do that, he was disappointed. And I didn't communicate well with him. You're not always going to make decisions that your mentors or your bosses love, but you got to be transparent. You got to be clear to them of why you're making the decision you're making. And because I wasn't clear, because I wasn't transparent, I burned that bridge that came back to haunt me 6 years later when Kraft and Nabisco merged. So, good lesson learned. It caused me to make a transition.
Was this the transition to Dun& and Bradstreet?
Yes,
This feels quite different from what you'd done so far.
this now was 2002, and recession was on. 9/11 had just happened, and so the job market was very difficult. And I had moved my kids 8 times, and so I really wanted to stay in New Jersey. And so I did a very comprehensive job in New Jersey with the idea that I am a marketing person. I can take my marketing skills into any industry. And that was the opportunity that I found at Dun& and Bradstreet, that they needed marketing skills into not a traditionally marketing driven company. And I put blinders on as to just about everything else. It was marketing and they were in New Jersey. So got the job, started, and the very first day knew that I had made a mistake. That
Wow.
that there were so many, maybe it's the first week. I won't judge it in the first day, but there were things that were a big cultural misfit. And I didn't really know or understand or love what Dun& and Bradstreet actually really did. That they sell credit reports. Okay, that's 1/3 of their business, but the other 2/3 is credit consulting. And I didn't really get that going in. And it's just not that interesting to me. I don't use the word passion very much because I think finding your passion is hard, but I do think you need to work with something you're interested in. And I quickly realized I was not interested in what Dun& and Bradstreet was doing. I went out and met with salespeople, and that was not very interesting. There was no plant to go talk to plant people, and marketing was me and one or two others. So it was quickly an F up, if you will. I knew pretty much in the first month that I would be searching for a job again. I lasted a year, but I knew it very quickly that it was not going to be a place where I could be long term.
The next move is yet another different move. You end up back at Darden, but this time as a staff faculty versus a student. What made you feel like that was going to be a right move? Spoiler alert, you spent 19 years at UVA in total, and you're still contributing time there. So how did you know that was going to work out?
It's easy to craft stories in hindsight that make it all fit together pretty well. And there were some stories in the moment that made it fit, or I wouldn't have done it, right? But it's a big deal to make a change that big. So left Dun& and Bradstreet and started interviewing for the next marketing job, right? So I said, okay, we got to be willing to move if I'm going to continue going up in corporate America. I interviewed for some really amazing chief marketing officer roles. A couple that were like, I was so excited about the head of marketing for Red Lobster, Dick's Sporting Goods. Interviewed for several terrific chief marketing officer roles and kept coming in second.
Mm.
And you always, when you come in second, you ask for feedback. And finally, one headhunter who had actually dealt with me on two of the jobs that I had come in second on said, they really didn't think you wanted it. It wasn't that you weren't qualified. It wasn't that you weren't their best candidate, but they didn't think you wanted it. And if you know me, which you do, that's kind of crazy. I'm a very enthusiastic person.
Yeah.
And so something was coming across in those interviews that showed some kind of hesitation. I wish I could say I did then what I teach now, which is real self-exploration and exploring all opportunities and then prototyping those opportunities. But I did sort of step back and say, why am I coming in second? And why am I not enthusiastic about those roles? One day, Darden had a reception in New York, New Jersey area. And I went to the reception just to be networking. That's what I was supposed to be doing to find the next job, right? And the dean was there and he said, well, gosh, you should come back and run the Career Development Center. We'd love to have an alum come and help our students. And I laughed and said, yeah, that sounds like fun. Everybody wants to get back to Charlottesville. But I didn't think much of it. And then I went back home and sitting at dinner with Sally and neighbors and was laughing about the dean said I should come be the head of the Career Development Center. And my neighbor said, well, gosh, that'd be perfect. That is so you. You love working with young people. I worked with young people in the church and I was a big part of our recruiting team. She said, you love working with young people. You guys have talked about how nice Charlottesville is. You're such a teacher. You should really consider that. And that was my self-exploration moment of, wow.
What a good neighbor.
I know, really? By this person asking me those tough questions and saying, hey, this is something that you're interested in, I did more self-introspection, realized I love marketing, but I was probably tired of marketing food products. That's why I was coming in second. And I really needed to do something that had a little more meaning to me. And I needed to find a place that I wouldn't be relocating after a couple of years. And then the other part was what Darden needed at the time was a marketing person. They needed someone who could help market Darden back to companies, market Darden students to companies. And so I had those skills. And when I came and interviewed, I had to do a presentation. And the prompt for one of the interviews was give a presentation on some aspect of career development. And I prepared for the interview and thought, I know nothing about career development, actually, but I know a lot about marketing. So I'm going to do a presentation on marketing Darden students. And that's what I did. I did a presentation on positioning and target audience and market segmentation. And while none of the people in the career office knew what I was talking about, the dean and a few others thought that was the approach that they needed. So that's how I got the job. When I started doing the job, I really fell in love with students and student development and created a couple of courses and realized that this probably was what I was most interested in. You might be able to come close to saying I started to find what I was passionate about, because I really am very passionate about helping people make career decisions and helping young people develop. And Darden was what launched me on that for the next 20 years.
What did you find as some of the biggest challenges as you entered the realm of education?
I think the biggest challenge for me was reconciling the type of career I was signing up for versus the type of career I had been in for 20 years. In career language, we call the career that I had been in for 20 years a linear career. Every couple of years, you get a promotion and a raise and a new job. And now I was signing up for what they call a steady state career, where this could be the last job I ever had, was director of the Career Development Center. And that was difficult to take. After 2 years, I was ready for a promotion. I was ready for more money, more work, more everything. And that was a different concept for a business school where all professors are a steady state career, right? They stay and specialize, where I had been a general person my whole life. So that was difficult to get used to. And I would say that one of my F ups in that first 10 years of higher ed was continually wanting to pursue more, such that at Darden, I almost worked myself out of not working with students. When you joined me, I was director of external relations and working mostly with companies. And I realized that I missed working with students. That's what I had signed up for. And so it's that comes back to careful what you ask for, because I wanted more and I got more, but I left what I loved. So that led to the next transition, which was the opportunity to go to the undergraduate career center, back working with students, back running a career center. In 10 years at Darden, a couple of jobs, but now finally really coming to grips with this idea of a steady state career. I am a career development professional now. I can run career centers. I'm not relocating. So the only good career center in town is at the main undergraduate university. So I made that move.
Are you feeling successful as you're going along?
I think I finally realized that the latter is not the measure of success.
Mm.
But it took more than just the move to Darden. It took 10 years more for me to learn that. Am I successful? I feel like I'm a really driven person, and I'm not done yet.
Mm.
And I'm on another chapter now. When I left Vanderbilt, I took a 1-day seminar, The Future, Your Life. And I wrote down a goal that I wanted to start my own business 40 years ago in 1984, approximately. And I'm just now fulfilling that goal from 40 years ago. And so I think it's another start, and it's another opportunity to have an effect on people. And now I'm not going to measure it by the next rung on the ladder. I'm going to measure it by how many people's lives I've really helped transform. And I am now clearly in a relationship business. And I am getting my energy from working with the client rather than working through a team. And it's a very different thing than I've done in my 40 years. And I'm really loving it. So I think it's just another step toward a successful career.
What were your fears going into creating your own business?
I think for 40 years, I've been afraid because of the risk involved. As you're going through life and you've got a mortgage and you've got kids and you've got college, every juncture at life when there's a transition, you say, what should I go do next? And I chose the safer route. And so if I could do anything differently, take more risk along the way. Now, coming to UVA and Darden was a massive risk, but I knew I could be safe when I got here. But it was a career risk. But so I think the biggest fear I had even months ago in starting this is failure. It's fear of rejection, fear of failure, all wrapped up into people aren't going to want to sign up for me as their career coach. And the other fear, one of the biggest things that I am trying to teach people is to network. It's pretty easy. You just go network and find your next job. 80% of jobs never get posted. You got to go find the hidden job market. To start your own business, what's the one thing you have to do the most? You have to start networking and getting your name out there. That has been so hard.
Yeah.
Because I'm just afraid that people will say, what is this guy doing? Why is he calling me?
It's making you vulnerable, right? Which most humans are pretty uncomfortable with vulnerability.
It is. I shouldn't be. You shouldn't be. No one should be. But we all are.
We all are.
And so that's been really hard. And you know what? I don't think I have reached out to one person who hasn't called me back. People have been giving to me in the last 6 months as I've reached out and asked for advice and help. People, every single person has stepped up to help.
What do you consider to be your blind spot?
Almost since my second year out of business school, I've been managing people. And I love managing people. I love working with teams. I love getting things done through people. I love giving teams energy and ideas. But I really don't like to give feedback, and I don't like to receive feedback. And because I really like to be liked, and I think that can really be difficult for a leader. It's not always easy to be liked, but I like to be liked. And so I like to only give positive feedback.
If you could go back and speak to your 20-something-year-old self, what advice would you give?
I would take more risk with my career. I would probably have stepped out on my own sooner. I probably wouldn't have been in the career space had I stepped on my own. I probably would have gone to a small company. I might have gone to technology. I think some of those things, look for emerging trends. Back when I was in business school, and it's still not terrible advice, but back when I was in business school, it was go to the biggest, best company that you can go to and get your next degree from there. Stay there 4 to 5 years or 10 years before you move on. And that, I think that advice may be not as relevant as it once was, but certainly I should have left the big company world after 10 years and done something a little smaller, newer. Some of my colleagues did, and it paid off. The other is be more confident. I outwardly have lots of confidence, but inwardly I'm questioning myself and second guessing myself too much, and especially some of those career decisions. So just be more confident in them that it's going to work out fine.
Let's jump into some rapid fire questions. How do you define success?
I define success more about relationships than I do about meeting the numbers. So many years it was about meeting the numbers, and now it's about, am I making a difference in people's lives?
Dream job as a child?
I was always expected to be a doctor. I thought I was going to be a doctor, but my hand shakes. It would be really hard to be a doctor, certainly not a surgeon.
What's your path not taken?
One of the coolest jobs I had when I was at Oscar Meyer was the Oscar Meyer Weinermobile program reported to me. And that was 10 young people right out of college who got to drive the Weinermobile, but they also got to build their own marketing and public relations portfolio in every town that they ever went to. That's probably the job I should have taken. I would love to have been one of those top wieners.
If you could switch jobs with anyone?
I don't like a lot about this person, but I love how creative and startup focused Elon Musk is, and how he just takes on big world problems and takes them head on without even flinching.
Remote work or in-person work?
My remote work is allowing me to be home with 2 of my grandkids 2 or 3 days a week. So I would take that over working in person anytime when I can have lunch with a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. But I do miss going into the office some days. So I think this idea of hybrid is the right thing.
Item on your desk that you cannot live without?
I really love the morning ritual of coffee. And so my coffee cup is sitting on my desk, and I love that waking up, the 5-10 minutes it takes me to make coffee and drinking it and checking email and vegging out in the morning.
What word drives you nuts?
Almost any corporate speak word drives me nuts now, like skill set or lens. Looking at it through this lens or that lens, I'm like, what? Yeah, those kind of words.
What actor would you have play you in a movie?
I kind of like Harrison Ford. I guess he's a little bit older, but he's just got that thing about him.
He's aged well.
Yeah. Yeah.
What company on your resume has turned the most heads?
I think having a big name company like Kraft is helpful on your resume. And Kraft has always been known as really training marketers well, and that'll get a recruiter's attention pretty quickly.
I'd like you to label 3 jobs: love, ultimate fun, skip the opportunity.
Working on the Oscar Meyer Weinermobile, ultimate fun. Working with students, love. Marketing credit reports, I'd skip that.
Last question. Is it true that you took Oreos to Asia?
That might be a little bit of an exaggeration because Oreos were already there. But yeah, my year and a half there was expanding Oreos to as deep into Asia as we possibly could. So that was a blast.
Well, Everett, thank you so much. This has been a lot of fun to get to know your career journey and to help normalize the hardships and F-ups along the way. So thank you so much for opening up and sharing.
Yeah, this was great fun, Deanne. Thanks for including me.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Effing Up. I'm your host, Deanne Reinert. If you enjoyed today's episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please subscribe on the platform you use to listen to podcasts. Share Effing Up with others, post about it on social media, and/or leave a rating and review. Until next time, count your perceived failures as part of your path to success. After all, we're all effing up.